There's a lot of nervous energy amongst the boys of Teaneck High on the eve of the season opener against Lodi tomorrow. The game, originally scheduled to be played at Passaic Stadium, had to be moved to Teaneck's newly renovated field because of the poor condition of the Passaic field. In addition, Lodi is coming off a 5-3 victory against the Lodi Richmonds, the local semi-pro team. Coach Stanley Piella brings a veteran team to the tilt and will send star athlete and ace pitcher Joe Picar to the mound. He will be backed up by 4 members of the All-State basketball team, led by Captain Pete Cotitto. In preparation for the season opener, Coach Knapp has really put the boys through the paces these last couple of weeks. The boys had heard that the new skipper was a disciplinarian. What they weren't prepared for was the amount of practice he had planned. Knapp knew he was not inheriting much talent at Teaneck, but was determined that there would not be a team in the league that would be in better condition or more prepared. You could say Charlie Knapp was the original Charlie Hustle. A 3-sport athlete who spent time in 2 professional leagues at the highest level, Knapp knew as well as anyone that talent alone was not enough to succeed. His teams would be schooled in the fundamentals and would work harder and play smarter than the competition. Unfortunately for the boys of Teaneck High, it was a typical North Jersey spring, filled with fickle weather. Regardless of the conditions, Knapp had a plan to get the team in shape before the season opener. He had little knowledge of the individual players' skill levels, having just taken over the team this season. Sure, he could rely on what he had been told about the boys' performance last season, but that was a middling team with only 7 returning lettermen, and he needed to fill an entire roster and assess both defensive and offensive skills. He already lost Russ Malul to a transfer to Mount Hermon Academy. Malul had shown flashes of dominance last season and was an infield single away from a no-hitter in a 3-1 win over Dumont. One thing he believed in was that pitching and defense wins ball games. Strength up the middle and strong arms on the mound would keep them in the game against almost any opponent. He used a chilly day at the end of March to hold an intra-squad scrimmage as a means to divide his team between the varsity and JV units. It was on that late March day that he got his first real taste of what the boys could do, and he was hardly impressed. Pitching for the second team, Jimmy Mayer, a young sophomore left-hander, had no trouble subduing most of the first-teamers, while Bill Brown and Bob Kaufman were roughed up pretty good. Projected first-teamer Eddie Griesbach got knocked around by second-teamers like Tony Capasso. Don Snyder showed some pop by hitting one out to the bleachers in center field. Knapp wanted to see the lineup in action against real competition, so he scheduled a couple of home-and-home games in the preseason, or what the county coaches affectionately call the Eskimo circuit. Fort Lee and Garfield were lined up, the latter through an old college connection. The mayor of Garfield was John Gabriel, and he just happened to be Charlie's roommate at Drexel. Based on the day's performances, Knapp selected his varsity lineup to begin the Eskimo circuit. Bill Kreider at first, Jimmy Bell at second, Johnny Thompson at third. Johnny Mangini, playing short. In the outfield left to right, Milt Welch, Butch Zimmerman, and Don Snyder. Catching would be Anthony Cordero. The pitchers, Jimmy Sloan, Warren Sheets, Gordon Dunlop, Ray Murock, and Jimmy Mayer. Eugene Kilmurray and Tony Capasso would be in the reserve. On March 30th, this ragtag group of 15 players traveled to Fort Lee for their first test. In weather more suitable for football than baseball, it was a low-scoring affair as the sting of the bats made for a little offense. Knapp used 3 pitchers that day, with his ace Jimmy Sloan showing some early season rust, but easily holding the cold bats in check. Knapp sent out an infield of Kreider at first, Bell at second. Mangini was tried at short, and Johnny Thompson at third. Bell was shaky at second and cost Teaneck the only run they surrendered. Kreider had the only extra base hit with a long double to right, and Mangini knocked in underclassman Tony Capasso for the go-ahead run in a 2-1 Teaneck win. Both coaches remarked that they were lucky no one froze to death, so they delayed the rematch a day, hoping for warmer temperatures. 2 days later, on Friday, April 1st, the weather was not much better, but the Fort Lee Bats certainly were. What was expected to be the weak link of the Teaneck squad reared its head in the third inning, when Bill Brown and Garland Dunlop were clobbered en route to a 16-2 drubbing. Only 2 scoreless innings by Jim Sloan served to slow down the otherwise relentless Fort Lee attack. Knapp was once again disappointed with his infield defense, and changes were certainly expected before squaring off against perennial power Garfield. On Monday, April 4th, Knapp's nine faced their toughest test yet in a preseason game against Garfield at the newly renovated Teaneck Field. The plan was to use his 3 top pitchers, the same trio that had held Fort Lee to only 2 hits and 1 run just a week ago. Big Jim Sloan would get the start, and Ray Mersch and Warren Sheets, whose cousin Chet had pitched a no-hitter for Teaneck just 2 years ago, would see the balance of the action. Knapp also decided to shake up his infield after the debacle in the second game against Fort Lee. Senior Ted Michelossi and sophomore Buddy Morgan were given time at second to challenge Jimmy Bell. Last year's second baseman Johnny Thompson moved to third, but is probably the team's best overall athlete, while Johnny Mangini continues to hold his position from last year at short, but is reported to be giving Knapp heart failure as he goes from looking like $1 million to kicking the ball all over the field from one play to the next. Bill Kreider and Anthony Cordero seem to be cementing their positions at catcher and first base respectively. Things started strong for Teaneck with ace hurler Sloan holding the powerful Garfield lineup in check until there were 2 outs in the 4th inning. But then a combination of a few clean hits, some sloppy infield play, and Sloan's sore arm led to a 6-run outburst. It was a shocking turn of events, as Sloan had never before been touched up for this many runs. If their ace is unable to heal and recover before the opener, the season will be lost before it even begins. Warren Sheets relieved Sloan and was able to stop the bleeding, but the Teaneck Bats couldn't muster a rally, and the boys lost 6-1. As the weather just wouldn't cooperate, the rematch with Garfield never materialized. After winning 1 and losing 2 in the Eskimo circuit, it was time for the Highwaymen to begin their inaugural season in the NNJIL.